Welcome to Business Smarts Radio with Tom and Dr. Dave, the clean approach to building your successful business. Now, let's introduce Tom Borg and Dr. Dave Miles. Welcome to Business Smarts Radio with Tom and Dr. Dave, where we bring you the clean approach to building your successful business. And by clean, we are not talking about spick and span and dust mops. This podcast is all about the acronym CLEAN. We're all about communication, leadership, engagement,
and no drama.
We've had enough of that for 2020 to last a decade. So today we are going to be doing part two, the last part of a two-part series, and how to leverage emotional intelligence to increase your performance. So tell us a little bit about last episode, Tom, and we'll fill in some gaps, and then we'll go and to get into the 10 ways to actually help people increase their level of emotional intelligence.
Well, Dave, I think in the last episode, what we try to do is just share with our listeners, what is emotional intelligence? Who is the person responsible for getting it started? Who carried the torch further, let's put it that way, into the 90s there. So that would be Daniel Goleman. At the same time, we're looking at ways that to leverage emotional intelligence, because it is one of the number one things we're finding in leadership today that makes a difference in a company, whether or not it's going to excel, especially during times like this, and the ones that are just going to fall to the side of the road. So I think it's critical that we carry on that conversation we had with, we know how important it is. We know a little bit about it, but what can we do now to actually apply it in our particular leadership positions?
Absolutely. And just a quick recap before we get into this here, there was a couple of different formal and academic definitions, but we just wrapped it up very simply. Simply put, emotional intelligence. And when we use that term and EQ, we use them synonymously. So yes. Emotional intelligence is the ability to sense, to understand, and to effectively apply your emotions so you can be more collaborative and productive with others. It's like you said, it came from a model based on Daniel Goleman's work. And there's 5 different things that they look at, how aware and knowing your own emotional state and how to manage that properly, being able to motivate yourself and also being able to recognize the emotions of others and then be able to manage those relationships. Because you can't really manage the emotions of others per se, but you can manage the way you react to the way other people are, their emotional state. And when you can recognize that, I think that's a big deal versus you seeing the people that, that's a good way to put it, let's just say not really astute on what's going on. They can't read the room and they end up inadvertently eating shoe leather because they put their foot in their mouth because they really didn't realize that this is not the right time to say X, Y, Z.
Yeah, they're good at managing their own emotional quotient within themselves. But when it comes to being able to transfer that to dealing with others, that social regulation, that's where they have a problem. So either way, it could go both ways. It could go both ways, where a person is really good at managing their emotions when they deal with others and not so good at managing themselves. But either way, we're going to talk about ways that we can enhance both of those areas for an individual so they can really tap their true leadership potential here.
Absolutely. And what we did is there was a couple things we talked about last time, and we're going to reiterate them here at the end as well. But what are there were 6 things that were really important as far as benefits to an organization for emotional intelligence?
Well, let's just list them off now, and then we'll get into them individually as we go throughout. But certainly increased leadership ability, the ability for that person or that team to lead their organization even better, increased team performance. So obviously, when you start managing people better, they're going to perform better. That's critical. Next on the list would be improved decision making. Too often we get our emotions wrapped up with our logistical thinking. That causes problems. But we have to have both. Now, we have to have that intelligence. We have to have the emotional intelligence. So the key is to bridge both of those together. They do work together harmoniously. The next is decreased occupational stress. So obviously, if we have stress going on in our workplace, if we can emotionally learn how to control ourselves or how we deal with others, that's going to have an effect on just how we have stress existing in our workplace. Also, reduce staff turnover. We know we talked about this before in some of our other podcasts. That is one of the most expensive things most companies encounter throughout the course of their life. Uh, uh,
Yeah,
The idea is you cannot run an effective company, a profitable company, if you have people constantly leaving. It's too expensive. And then finally, just increase personal well-being. The idea of being able to manage yourself overall in a holistic sense just makes for a much more healthier and much more successful leadership uh, maintenance. Let's put it that way.
yeah. It's when you're a business owner. I mean, you're spend way too much time. You spend all kinds of time, working in your business, working on your business, and same thing. If anything you can do to help make yourself better, have a better work-life balance, help things work better emotionally, and just in general for you. I mean, your personal well-being is important. It's kind of like the theory with the, on the airlines when the oxygen mask drops. I mean, they're very, very particular.
Yeah.
Put your mask on. You can't help somebody else until you know that you're going to be in good shape yourself. So put your mask on first. Make sure your personal well-being is in good shape, and then you can effectively help folks around you.
Well, and to add to that, Dave, so often we model the behavior we want other people to do. So if we're not doing that ourselves first, like the old saying, people hear what they see what we do a lot faster than they listen to what we're saying. So the key is by modeling what we want to see in their behavior, that's just going to make things really happen in a much quicker fashion.
Absolutely. Well, this episode, we were going to talk about 10 different ways
Mhm.
that you can go and improve emotional intelligence. So, because unlike IQ, your EQ is fashionable. It does increase over time over the years. So that's one of the reasons that they don't always use it when it comes to hiring, because there is a difference in age. The older you are, the more experiences that you've had, the more you've had a chance to be able to work and develop your emotional intelligence. And so it may be developed to a higher degree than somebody that may be just starting into the workforce because they don't have the same level of experience over the decades that they do. But
Mhm.
unlike IQ, which is relatively fixed at a certain age, at least emotional intelligence is workable. You can improve it. And we're going to give you 10 ways that you can improve it. And with each of those ways, we're going to talk about them a little bit. And then we're going to give you 3 questions to go back and ask. So grab a pen, grab some paper, rewind if you need to, take some notes, and let's get into it. So,
Mhm.
technique number 1 to improve your emotional intelligence: journal every day. Thoughts?
So often people, when they say journal, oh, that's something else I have to do. It takes time. I've got to write it out, or I have to type it onto my keyboard so that I can see it in a document. What's nice about journaling, and we both do this every day, is the fact that it does give you time to listen to your own thoughts. And when you're putting them down in writing, there's something that happens. And I think it's kind of like a learning experience that you're having, or at least certainly an awareness experience, because when you're journaling, you're jotting down things that have happened. You get your feelings on paper, you get your awareness levels raised because of your ability to spotlight these things you're writing down. So journaling is powerful. It does give the person a chance to just stop, slow down, and stop, and be able to just sort through their ideas and thoughts. And this is, I think, where when we distill this knowledge and information, I think this is where we really become more aware and in tune as a leader.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, any day that you can kind of reflect on just your general presence, and kind of how your emotions impacted, good or bad, your
Hmm.
goals, your motivations, your strengths, your key aspirations. I mean, the biggest thing is, I think you mentioned about being honest with yourself, because it is an opportunity to kind of step back and kind of step out of the area and look
Hmm.
objectively onto what you're doing and what's going on. What's been good, what's been bad. And if you can kind of identify some trends, showing that to somebody else that you really trust
Hmm.
and kind of get their thoughts on it, because sometimes they may see it differently than you're observing it. But it's that being real with yourself and being authentic is absolutely true. And that's one of the things that once you kind of understand that for a while, then you can kind of develop a plan on basically based on what works and what doesn't work, to be able to improve and say, okay, these are the things that I've been doing when I have been able to keep my composure and do well and manage my
Hmm.
emotions. And so that's a big one there, is to be able to actually not just write it down, look at it, become aware of it, be able to do something with it.
Absolutely. Right on the money there, Dave.
So 3 questions that I would say to ask yourself as far as for journaling every day, just ask yourself, when did I feel good today? When did I not feel good today? And
Mhm.
how do I act when I feel good versus when I don't feel good? So it's
Mm.
all about behaviors and actions. And so that's one of the things that I was really impressed with. We're talking about tools and resources, a book by Marshall Goldsmith called Triggers.
Mhm.
And that is, we'll talk about that a couple times. Matter of fact, that's our next point is identifying triggers. But that is a fantastic book because it's kind of like the power of habit. It's that cue. You have something that cues you, that triggers you, and between that automatic trigger and the response, if you are aware of that, that can build in just a moment, just the briefest moment of gap.
Mhm.
In that gap is where you can insert your conscious decision making, and that's where you can really control that. So, number two is just what we said, identifying triggers.
Mhm.
That's huge. So, what would you say as far as would be helpful to be able to identify triggers?
Well, then that really resorts back to that journaling too. You can always be aware of that at the end of the day. But the fact is, we know what our buttons are. Let's put it that way. So when someone does something or says something and we have a reaction, now that's the key word there, reaction versus a response. That's where we want to start paying attention because now we have a choice when we're aware that we have a option of responding in a certain way. But if we just react the same way each time, then that's like we're on automatic. We're like a robot. Someone pushes our button, we react.
Yeah.
So that's one way to look at it.
Now, I think the biggest thing is identifying the behaviors that trigger a negative reaction. Like you said,
Yes.
you might it be a positive reaction, but is a I mean a positive reaction is just that it's positive. But you
Hmm.
want to make sure and you find the ones that are negative reactions and then
Hmm.
go from there.
Hmm.
But now you realize, okay, well now how do I can't fix it if I'm not aware of it. And that's the biggest thing with the journaling and identifying triggers. It's no different than ahs and ums and uhs when it comes to public speaking and
Hmm.
a program like Toastmasters. You can't fix it if you're not aware of it.
And Dave, maybe we'll mention this later, but the fact is sometimes a good coach or a mentor can help us identify some of these buttons that we have already installed and help us to become aware of them because sometimes we don't realize that we're doing these things. Or maybe it's going to be a person that works for you. You could have a heart-to-heart conversation with them and say, hey, what are some of the things I might do that looks like I'm just being triggered? I'm just doing something that I really am reacting to, and I need to know that. So when that does happen, I can become aware of it and stop doing it.
Yeah, that's where sometimes a good, solid, anonymous 360-degree survey sometimes could be very helpful. So,
Hmm.
3 questions to ask about technique number two, identifying triggers is this: what am I set off and how do I respond? Question
Hmm.
number one. Question number two, what would be a better response
Hmm.
if you weren't happy with the one you had? And then how can I change those responses? 3 questions. What set me off and how did I respond? How could I have responded better and how could I change those responses?
Hmm.
So that's number two. Number three, exercise regularly.
Well, let's face it, exercise is the elixir of champions. What we know is that it does help the body run more smoothly, effectively. It cleans out a lot of garbage that's within us. You have a good aerobic training program that allows us to just get our body working. And try to do this every day to some degree. You're going to always be in better shape. I know that when you exercise or when I exercise, I know I feel better. If I don't start my day with a good workout, then I don't feel right. So
Yeah.
the key is to do exercise on a regular basis, not once every 4 months, but do it on a regular basis. And it's just going to help get rid of some of this extra stress we have within us. It's going to help us be able to go out and have some time just to think too. That's a great time to do some thinking while you're working out. So it's a lot of benefits to working out, but certainly when it comes to managing your emotional intelligence, it can be a key result area.
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, regular physical activity, it just increases your ability to manage your emotions and to be able to relax. I mean, it produces
Hmm.
that physical exertion itself produces the chemicals that improve your mood and just make you more relaxed. I mean, it's not just endorphins, but just in general. I mean, it's just a,
Oh
a
yeah.
great way, like you said, to really help with those emotions. And so, 3 questions to ask of that is kind of what kind of exercise do you enjoy the most?
Hmm.
Some people like running and aerobic. Some people like lifting and
Hmm.
anaerobic, and some combination thereof.
Hmm.
Some to some degree, a little bit of both is a good thing. Some strength
Yes,
training to a certain degree,
absolutely.
Doesn't have to be weights or anything crazy. Just even just calisthenics or something with
Mm-hmm.
your own body weight is good.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get more of it? What do you enjoy? Because start out with what you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it. And if you
Correct.
start off small and make it into a habit, you can always increase and add other things to it while
Mm-hmm.
you're already in the habit of doing things you enjoy. How do I get more of the exercise that I do enjoy? And are there little small activities during the day that you can start doing? Like, for example, at work, can you walk at lunch? Can you take the steps? I mean, it might be, all right, I've got 5 floors to go up. Maybe I just go up 1 floor today, and then I take the elevator the rest of the way up, and
Mm-hmm.
eventually you just work your way till you're going up all five, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
I go down all five and then I go up the elevator. Just little things that you can start doing,
Mm-hmm.
and that way, when you start getting into the habit of them, then it makes it easier once you get into that habit.
Oh
So
yeah.
I would say number three is exercising
Yes.
regularly. So
Mm-hmm.
number four is practicing mindfulness.
Sure. So mindfulness, just being aware. I think that's really the key. Being aware of who you are, where you are, who you're with, and being aware so that you can put your best foot forward. Sometimes we're in a situation where someone says something or does something, and like we mentioned a moment ago, we could react, and it might not be the best way to react, or we can just kind of hold on to whatever it is that has happened and process it. So have some mindfulness about what is going on around us, and at the same time, be able to choose the best way to respond.
Yeah, and that takes so many different forms. I mean, it could be meditation or just some kind of daily quiet reflection. It could be yoga,
Mm-hmm.
it could be prayer. There's all kinds of different ways that you can practice mindfulness. And sometimes it just is enough just to slow down and give your mind and body a break and time to catch up, and give yourself a few minutes to kind of collect your thoughts and think a little bit. And even that is super helpful. But a lot of times, when you do that, you can kind of get an idea of the different emotions that are there, and how you know, how
Mm-hmm.
well things went or how well things didn't went, and ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen in a certain situation? That's a great exercise. Okay, well, if this bad thing does happen, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen?
Mm-hmm.
And go from there.
That's right. Dave, I got to share a quick story with you. So
Sure.
this happened a few weeks back. I had my lawnmower. It's a battery powered lawnmower. Thing just stopped working. I wasn't sure what the heck was wrong with it. So not too many shops around here will even deal with these things. So I found one. Is a good 30 minutes from my house. I took it over there. I walked into this little shop, and I noticed a gentleman who was sitting at his computer, and he was just typing away. And I thought he would heard me come in. So I
Yeah.
said, "Hello." Nothing. So I said, "Hello." And I kind of walked around so he could see me. And as he turned, I guess I might have startled him. I'm not
Oh,
sure. At the time, I wasn't sure. So what happens? He gets up and he was kind of like kind of short with me. He wasn't very friendly. And here I thinking, I'm bringing this lawnmower to him, and do I trust this guy because he's treating me like this? I mean, is this any kind of way to service a customer? So
right.
anyhow, the conversation was kind of curt. He walked out to the vehicle with me, and we unloaded the lawnmower, and he took it back in there, and he was kind of short with me even still. So I said, okay, fine. I said, well, how long is it going to be before I hear from you? Oh, 4 or 5 weeks. They're busy. So 4 or 5 weeks later, he does call me back, tells me about the issue that needs to be addressed. I said, fine, go ahead, take care of it. So I go back the next day because it was finished now. I go back in to get it. Now he's not there. So I walk in, and I had to go in another door, the regular door most people would take, because now this is warm, a colder weather, so that the main garage door was opened before. It's now closed. So I walk in, and I'm standing at the counter. Now this guy is not there. Somebody else is there, and I'm waiting, and I happen to look down. There's this big sign. It's a big blue colored sign. It's been taped down with clear tape. It's all beat up, and I'm reading it. It says, if you find that I have not responded to you right away, I have trouble with my hearing. And it goes on and on to say that this guy who I talked to before, he was very hard of hearing.
Oh,
So
wow.
so what happened is, what a light bulb went off in my head. I had to totally rearrange my thinking, because obviously what had happened before, this gentleman doesn't hear very well at all. I actually startled him, and he was just reacting, and he was just trying to be the best person he could be. And so here's what I'm saying. In the 4 or 5 weeks I was waiting for my lawnmower, I had all these notions. This guy's a real idiot. He doesn't care about his customers. He's probably not a very good business person. And it all melted when I saw that sign. So here's what I'm saying. My emotional response did a 180 when I learned new information. And I actually felt ashamed of myself, quite frankly. So what I'm saying is that emotional intelligence has an important important part of our life, and we need to be able to, just as you said, take a step back
Yeah.
and reassess. And my goodness gracious, we're gonna see things so much differently.
Yeah. And sometimes just having that empathy and just say, well, they may be having a bad day. Well, I don't
Mm,
know what their situation is,
mm-hmm,
goes a long way. So, three
mm-hmm,
questions to ask
mm-hmm.
as far as practicing mindfulness: what emotions am I feeling? What caused these emotions?
Yes,
And what's the worst that can happen? Get into
yes,
that. So, what emotions am I feeling? What caused them? And then what's the worst thing that can happen?
yes.
Number five is document specific goals.
Mm-hmm,
So I look at once you identify specific emotional intelligence goals, I mean, you need to kind of improve and revisit them regularly to ensure that you're on track to achieve them. Thoughts?
mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that they say, if you can't ink it, forget about thinking it because you're not going to get anywhere. You got to put goals. You got to have targets. Be reasonable about those targets. Put them in smaller chunks so that you can reach the large target one step at a time. So I think that's the key. When you look at setting goals, we have to be real with ourselves. If we really want to make something happen, we've got to commit to some type of a goal and then hold ourselves accountable to reach that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So three, and do yourself a favor, write it down, review them on a regular basis, but celebrate
Hmm.
small victories.
Yes,
We
there we
always
go.
want to wait till we get to the very end and have the big
Hmm.
celebration, but you know what? Celebrate little small victories along the way. It means a lot.
Yes, it
So
does.
three questions to ask yourself on this one: what do I want to accomplish in regards to my emotions and my feelings? When do I want to accomplish these goals? And then what rituals or habits do I need to set into place to achieve them? Because really, achieving those goals are going to be nothing but the compilation of the rituals and habits that you put into place to do
Hmm.
that. So we got number six, and number six is visualize your aspirations. And that one you're talking about not just consider the journey you're on, putting down your goals, but what would the end state look like? If all right, if I reach my goal, what would that look like?
Hmm.
It's very simply.
Well, here's the key is use your senses. What are you going to see? What are you going to hear? What are you going to feel? What are the people going to say to you? Uh, what are you going to say to yourself? And just the idea is to really get into the future in the present, so to speak. And that would be a great way of doing it. And we don't do that enough, by the way, in,
Yeah.
in the positive way. We do it in a negative way, Dave. Do it all
Oh
the time.
yeah.
We worry about, oh my God, if this happens or if that happens. And now we are visualizing, but we're visualizing the wrong things. So to do that in a positive way, I think is a great way to help us prepare to actually experience what it is we're trying to achieve by anticipating how we're going to experience it.
Yeah, so we could do that for a lot of goals, but I mean, that one is just simply asking, what does your ideal state look like?
Hmm.
How will it feel when I get there? And why
Yes.
is the goal important to me? Because if you don't have that, why is the goal important to me? You're
Mm,
not going to keep putting in the time and effort and energy to try to reach that goal.
that's right.
So number seven is pretty interesting. Number seven on ways to improve your emotional intelligence is predicting the response. So if you think about communicating with others and you're asking yourself, how will people react to different gestures or statements or different things? And, what can you do to kind of, if you can anticipate what somebody might feel when you're saying something or they might do, you can kind of consider the potential response a person might give. And that is really powerful, I think, when you can depending on the situation. Well, if I was going to be the one having the boss sit down and tell me that this bad thing was going to happen or this change was going to happen or there was going to be something different in our job or our company, what would my response be if I was the one receiving that information?
Hmm.
Taking a few minutes to put yourself in that other person's shoes, I think is a big
Hmm.
one. If you can anticipate the response even a little bit,
Hmm.
goes a long way.
Sure.
What do you
And
think?
one way to look at that would certainly be to say, if I was that other person, how would I feel about this? And how would I respond in a favorable way? How would I respond in a not favorable way? So think about it from their perspective. There could be a couple different ways they could respond. And then back to you again, how are you going to respond to their response?
Yes, and I think that's really the key. If you can kind of predict the response, then it's not going to be a surprise to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's less of a chance of triggering you. If they get defensive about something, you think, okay, I was expecting them to
There you
potentially
go.
be defensive about it versus why are they getting defensive? It's nothing I can do about it. And then it ended up
Mm-hmm.
escalating and becoming a major, major problem. So, it ends up being more of a win-win when you can kind of predict those responses. So three
Yes.
questions to ask yourself as far as predicted response. How does this person feel right now? Can I
Mm-hmm.
gauge how they're feeling and maybe their emotional state before I even start the conversation? Two is, how do I know this person feels? How do I know how this person feels? I do
Mm.
I know because I'm guessing? Do I know because I worked with them for a while? Do I know because just I'm just kind of taking a wild stab at it? I mean, how do I know? How does this person feel right now? But how do I know that I know
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah. What
And
are
the
the
third one went,
indicators?
yeah, exactly. And third one is, how might I make this person feel even better? So, what can
Mm-hmm.
I do to maybe reframe the message? What can I do to preface it with something, to end it with something? How can I package it to where I'm delivering the same information, but I can make them feel a little bit better about what's going on? And maybe that can temper the response and keep something that may have gone way out of control
Mm-hmm.
in a nice, tight package.
You bet. I know one of the best ways that I found that works for people I work with is just to share with that other person how you might have been in the same situation at one time and how you experienced whatever you experienced and how you were able to get through it.
Yeah.
So, in other words, just to say, hey, listen, we're all human. I've been there. So let me share with you what happened to me. Here's what I think is happening with you.
Yeah, it just makes it relatable, and I mean
Absolutely.
that's the whole thing. We're here, we're people, we're human, we're here to interact and relate with other humans, and
That's it.
I think being real and authentic makes a big, 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 big difference. So, last couple ones here. Number 8, careful observation. So, had a study by a researcher in body language in the 50s. Okay, over 55% of communication they said was sent through nonverbal. So, some people think it's a little bit higher, but even at the 55%, what are we gaining and losing when we're virtual over Zoom and
Mm,
body language? What do we pick up as far as body language and kind of just the general energy and vibe when we're in person with somebody?
mm-hmm.
What are the nonverbal cues that are coming up? Facial expressions, hand gestures, nervous tics, body posture. I think paying careful attention to those types of things can really create some insight into their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just they've got their arms crossed. They kind of look at you like, yeah, sure, buddy, I
Mm-hmm.
get you. Just all those are kind of a little bit of cues to pick up on what maybe their emotional state might be. So, how observant are you? And can you make sure that you do have a careful observation and also be aware? This is part of the self awareness part of it.
Mm-hmm.
What verbal cues are you giving off?
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. So much easier to do that when you're in person, when
Yeah.
it's more three-dimensional. But we just have to be that much more aware if we're doing something through a video transmission.
Yeah. And
So, yeah,
still, even video transmission is still you pick up on a lot more of that than just phone. And
yeah.
phone is more than an email, and email is more than in
Oh
text.
boy.
So I
Yeah.
mean, it's as you start to whittle down and less and less and less of that, the worse going to end up being. So the three questions that I would ask
Mm-hmm.
as far as under careful observation would be: ask yourself, what is my own body language currently saying?
Mm-hmm.
What's the other person's body language be telling me about them right now? And then if they felt better, would their body language change? How would
Mm-hmm.
that change if they were in a better emotional state? And is there anything I can kind of do about that? So
That's
those
right.
are three interesting questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Next to last one is finding common ground. Number 9, finding common ground. That's a big one. Because I mean, honestly, you want to be able to identify these person, and if you can identify and appreciate what makes a person stand out in a crowd, just having that genuine curiosity for others and their well-being, that
Mm-hmm.
is important. Because if you truly don't care about people, you know, I think John Maxwell talked about is you can't add value to people unless you actually value people.
Mm-hmm. Nice way to say it.
And so I really like that. What are their areas of interest? What are they, what are some of the questions they might have? What are the things they're interested in? And build on areas of common interest. And just even if there is not a tremendous amount of common interest, just being present in the conversation and getting the fact that I truly care and I want to listen to what you say. Even if
Sure.
we don't agree on anything,
That's
just
right.
that right there goes a long way, being
That's right.
present, not dismissive.
Good eye contact, nod your head, smile, basic things that allow that person to know that you're accepting them and that you value them.
Yeah, and you're actually listening and care about
Hmm
what they're saying. So, three questions to ask about finding common ground. What does this person care most about?
hmm
What do I have in common with this person? And
hmm
number three, how can I build a bridge to their interests?
Perfect.
So, what do they care about the most? What do I have in common with them? And then how can I build bridges based
hmm
on those interests? And so the last technique is just maintaining eye contact.
Mm,
Maintaining eye contact, and this is mainly in Western cultures, but strong eye contact shows that you have an interest in what others are saying.
that's
You're
right.
just looking off to the ceiling. You're sitting there fiddling on your phone, and you're not paying
Mm,
any attention to them. In most Western cultures, it's not the way all over the world. But if you that shows a very strong potential of you being dismissive, not listening, not paying attention, not being present, and a lot of people take offense to that.
hmm
You might not mean to give offense, but that's the way
That's
it's
right.
coming across.
That's where you want to be in the present moment. And just like you're saying, Dave, good eye contact, that is probably the most important aspect of connecting with another person.
Absolutely. So the last three questions for that one is how can I let this person know that they have my undivided attention?
Mm,
Okay, that's a big one. Whether that's
yes, it
leaning
is.
forward, whether that's unclasping your hands, whether that's not having your arms crossed, looking them in the eye, like I said, nodding, just really just listening to. I want to hear what you say, not I'm
Hmm
hearing what you say, but I'm formulating what I'm going to say next. I'm
Yeah.
actually listening and hearing and processing what you're saying, even if it takes a second or two afterwards to kind of awkward silence to formulate what you're saying, you at least heard them and understood them.
hmm
So, how can I let them know that they have my undivided attention? What facial expressions would make them feel that way, right? And
hmm
make them feel respected? And then, how can I listen more intently? Those are the
hmm
three questions that you might want to ask. So, those are the 10 techniques that we have just as a starter. They're not the only ones. There's a lot of ways to improve your emotional intelligence.
hmm
And to me, I think that whether you're a leader, because the higher you go in an organization, the more important emotional intelligence is, and high performers. 90% of high performers have strong, high levels of emotional intelligence. So, whether you're looking to be a high performer or be more effective as a leader or a business owner, I would say anything you can do to improve your emotional intelligence is a huge. So, those are just 10 things right there. The
hmm
first thing I would start out with is you can't improve anything that you don't know about. And we mentioned about that before. You can't fix it if you don't know about it. My suggestion would be for our listeners is find out where your emotional intelligence level is.
hmm
Where can you improve upon? What are you really great at right now? Tom and I both, we can, especially we have assessments that are based on Daniel Goleman's model of emotional intelligence specifically that we love. You can always find other instruments that are out there that are really good and solid instruments as well. But just reach out to either of us. Our information is below. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about either one for your personal or give you a complimentary sample to see how this would really work with your entire team.
hmm
So please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about that. And like I said, get you a complimentary sample just to kind of see if this would be a good fit for your team going forward. So any last let's wrap up kind of the things that made emotional intelligence important in an organization. And let's go ahead and wrap up this episode
Sure.
on emotional intelligence and how to leverage it to increase performance.
Well, like you mentioned, Dave, we can't do much about emotional intelligence unless we're aware of where we're at to begin with. So there's a lot of good resources out there. I suggest to our listeners that they start looking for those resources and start learning more about emotional intelligence. Look at the opportunities we're offering to you in terms of a free assessment to assess your own level of emotional intelligence. We'd be happy to work with you on that, maybe work with your teams as well. But the key is take action. Don't just forget about this information, but take a couple steps towards getting the information you need and implementing it, you'll be in a much better place 30 days from today. That's for sure.
That is for sure. So either way, I hope you got a lot out of the last two episodes about learning a little bit more about emotional intelligence. And in this episode on 10 ways to be able to improve your emotional intelligence, there's a lot there. So go back, rewind, take some notes, copy down those 10 items and those three questions per item, and really start to look to see how you can improve your level of emotional intelligence today. So thanks for joining Business Smarts Radio with Tom and Dr. Dave. We're bringing the clean approach to building your successful business, and we will see you all next time. Take care.